Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. Youth competitiveness state of play, I think it's a topic of the time. For a long time, we only discussed the way for transformation to a carbon neutral economy, but now we have learned, even in Germany, that this has to be embedded in a broader approach, had to be integrated in growth policy and in the question how we can improve the supply side conditions. And that at least is important for 3 points. First is we have to do in this green transformation towards carbon neutral economy all at once, all together, all at once. And that's a different challenge compared to the situation in all other fields of structural change in the economy, because we defined a fixed date. In the European level, 2050, in Germany, 2045 in our climate law. So we have to reach this climate neutrality in the year 2050, let's say, for Europe. And from this on, we are looking back from the year 2050, what we have to do in the year 2040, 2030, 2025, and we're just not doing. We are doing this in the very clear defined time framework. So the great transformation is really a challenge on its own. The second, we realize since, I would say, the mid of the last decade, the ongoing great power competition on the world, the conflict, or better to say, the system competition we realized before had become to a severe system conflict between the transatlantic West and China. And for that, we have also to focus on different economic topics. Competitiveness is even very important here, but it has also embedded in a wider approach. We have to discuss about investment in defense. You know, in Germany, we're just paying 1.4% of GDP. We accepted to pay 2.0 from GDP in the NATO agreement, but it's only a hope that we can fulfill these targets after 2026. And until the end of the parliamentary period just in, we have a specific fund financing the investment or the expenditure for defense, but then it's still open. We have to focus on international cooperation, and we have to focus on resilience of our supply chains, of our networks, even into the aspect of great power competition. And the third need for a discussion about competitiveness has something to do with the specific German situation. 25 years ago, there was the first title of The Economist, Germany, the Thick Man of Europe. This was only a clear statement. 2 weeks ago, again, the Economist titled Germany maybe the sick man of Europe, or the question mark was behind. So there's still some hope. There's still some hope. And today, maybe you have heard about it, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz presented a paper called Deutschland-Pakt, Germany-Pakt. And I've looked in. Yeah, not really surprising. All we already know. A little bit better bureaucracy there, faster procedures on the other hand. What was decided in the growth chance law from the last week's discussion, there is no big point. There's no trigger for boosting growth again, so we are still waiting for that. Let me go to the next or first slide after these introductory remarks. If we are discussing competitiveness, we are discussing competition and the structure of markets. And it's quite clear that the world is on the way from a monocentric, power-defined structure, as we had in all historical times of globalization. In the 19th century, the hegemon was the United Kingdom. In the 20th century, United States. So what is the future shape of and structure of globalization? It's still open, but the idea or the hypothesis of a polycentric structure may be very convincing just now. So looking on these three regions, China and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the United States together with Canada and Mexico and the European Union, we see we're very successful, we'd say, only in greenhouse gas emissions. We are working hard on our GDP growth, and this is one of the discussions we had, the sluggish growth of the last period, and specifically the sluggish growth of the German economy, because Germany is still more than 30% of the GDP of the Eurozone and European Union. On the other hand, the dynamic in China, which is just also under threat, under pressure, what we saw in the last data from China, but you could realize from the last forecast for China that we will have a GDP growth below 5%, maybe below 4% in the average of the next years. That means that it's not so clear as it seems at the first glance that China will be number one, because there's some other point, and if you just pick one in your, not the next slide, but yeah, and this is the old age dependency ratio. We made a calculation for the year 2050. And it's interesting to realize that the highest number of people China had 2 years ago. There's a shrinking population already to the one-child politics of over a lot of decades. And we expect for the year 2050 that the old age dependency ratio will more or less the same than in Germany. And some differentiation we have in Europe. You know, we have this very low birth ratio in the Middle East European transformation economies, a little bit higher in France and in the northern states of Europe 1.7, Germany 1.5, and to the south in Italy also 1. So the demographic challenge, I think it's a problem not only of the German society, it's a European problem. And if you look on this, you would say, or you may say that the United States will be the winner for the future. There is no similar demographic structure. They have a different immigration to the United States, and their own activity, so to say, is different what we see in the advanced economies in Europe. So coming from that, we had to discuss about the potential for higher competitiveness in this world of intensified competition. As I said, we are discussing the business model. We are discussing the question which way we can transform our market economy to a carbon neutral situation. I would stress at the beginning that if we want to make clear that this is an interesting continent, that Europe is still a story and a hope for the future, then we had to focus on two things. The first is, we in Europe, for us it's quite clear that market economy, democracy and civil society are three sides of the same aspect. So these are integrated perspective of the Western style openness for freedom and responsibility since the late 18th century. So again, market economy, democracy and civil society. There is no civil society in China. And we may have some struggle in the United States with their constitutional setting and the bipolar orientation of the two parties. Also, this is of economic importance. Maybe next year we have a different outcome for the presidential election in the White House. The Inflation Reduction Act will, from this on, maybe only a story of history, because the Republican Party will have a different perception. There's no the same priority given to climate action. They have a different perspective on the states in the United States, which were more or less see the advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act. So this may change, and we have to see this. And the second is that Europe is a club of unpredictable democracies. We are discussing this very often in a very critical sense. I would say it's the best we can have, because a club of unpredictable democracies means competition in ideas, competition in new ways, and this is what the heart of Europe it is. So what has changed, if you're looking on competitiveness, the Russian aggression against Ukraine last year caused the gas and oil price crisis we never saw in the similar way. People in the room will remember the year October 1973. It was totally different because in spring 1974 the situation was totally different. The volumes were back, the prices were higher, and since then the markets for international energy resources are more or less political markets. And this we have to realize that this is about risk premium, and this have changed from time to time. In Germany, we just see on the exchange electricity price this year that sometimes we are close to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. It's not so bad. Remember that for new contracts in Germany, just you have to pay 22 cents per kilowatt hour. It's still higher than we had in the medium-term average over the last decade. It's not so far away from the price level in the second half of 2021. So the peaks we saw last year are over, but nobody may say that this will not come back. There's a risk because due to political reaction and whatever will happen. So from this gas and oil price crisis, we discussed the problems of our traditional business model, specifically the German business model, is the heart of Europe, and this business model or economic model is under pressure. And this has to do with the high orientation towards global markets. The German export ratio or trade ratio came up from 50% 30 years ago to nearly 100%. It's a really globally integrated economy, and a lot of discussions about the future risk of the German economy and then for the impact for Europe has to do with these dependencies. The question which way we can move on with our trade relations, with our sourcing and global sourcing management, or we have to be aware that we should have a closer focus on friendshoring and something like that. I would say that's the wrong way, because who is a friend today and maybe is also a friend in the future? And also important is what's a commodity today and what may be a commodity in the future. It's changed. I remember discussion in the automobile sector 8 years ago that there's no need to have own battery production in Europe. Why? It's a commodity, no problem to get an import from the world market. Very easy, standardized products. And they say, oh, Bosch, we will come in for the next technological step in battery production, the solid-state battery. Yeah. We're still waiting for the solid-state battery. After 10 years of research, we made a lot of research in Germany, in Karlsruhe and Gießen, for example, at universities. So what I want to say is it's not so easy to bring in all this idea of more resilience, different sourcing strategies to have a different backbone for our competitiveness, because it may be true for a certain period of time, but after 12 months it may be different, or even to the perspective of the political change in the United States. So we have to need even closer look in all the structural aspects of our locational competition. And maybe the next slide, we have defined as some other German economic research institutes such a locational index. And this is based on the data for 2022. You see that this is a dynamic ratio that Germany has a remarkable difference. All other regions observed here, China is quite obvious, United States, Japan, and other selected European countries have at least one indicator with a level above 100. Germany has in all the indicators is below 100. And the question, what we are doing here, and the problem is that all the others moved a little bit in tax policy, in better regulation, in faster decisions on infrastructure. So the problem we have is not, of course, only that we made bad decisions. The problem was that we made no decisions in the past. No decision about tax reform for more than 10 years. There was no severe tax reform approach in Germany. And this is really a problem. You see, we have an average effective tax ratio for company activity of 28.8%. The average effective tax rate in European Union for companies is 18.8. Yeah? So from this point, you had to go to other locations. And if, in addition to that, the high energy prices, then we have a problem. Some positive impact, next slide, we may see from the regional perspective. And that's also an interesting aspect of the question of competitiveness. We made an research about the innovative strengths of the provinces in Canada, the German federal states, the regions in Italy, and 50 states in the United States. Different indicators about knowledge base, globalization, innovation capacity were used and scaled up from 0 to 100. And you see that the best and worst region in Germany are more or less in a better shape than the best and worst region in the other countries observed in our study. And this gives some hope. I would bring to your attention the better regional balance in the German economy, which is even more pronounced than all the other European economies. And this gives an idea that for future something will change. We have now in Germany a lot of investment in the former East German Länder, more investment from outside, from abroad than before. So we see a new automotive cluster in the southeast from Berlin. It's not only Tesla, but it's Tesla. It's quite clear. They already have 10,000 collaborators. They are working on this next step, 17,000. I live very close to that. It's really impressive to see that. And if you would have asked me 10 or 15 years ago, is there a chance to bring industry back to Brandenburg, whenever industry was in the same way, because the industrial regions of former GDR were Saxony and Thuringia, the southern parts, a little bit in Saxony-Anhalt, but Brandenburg was always different. Yeah, agriculture and some different aspects, and what was introduced in the GDR period of steel production, so was very artificial. Now we see that in this world of the big transformation, greenfield investment will work to create new structures, new networks, and this gives us hope that this investment activity will help us to bring Germany and Europe a step further to the higher level of competitiveness. And next slide, and this is embedded in a discussion you all know of a comeback of industrial policy. Just a published paper from Danny Roderick made an overview about you can say the business cycle of industrial policy, and the industrial policy actions has really moved up since the last 5 years, or during the last 5 years. I think it's impressive. We see all around the world that there is some idea, some argument to do it in a different way than before. And that is, in my interpretation, cost for 3 points, or cost in 3 points. First is a decarbonization per fixed date. Decarbonization per 2050, it's a challenge. So we have to work, but we never had to do in the past on both sides on the markets. We are working on the supply side, giving price signals via the CO2 price. And we are working on the demand side in defining lead markets, where the state is creating demand that the scaling problem of new technologies will be manageable. So this is what we never did before, and we do not really have an experience on that. And we see that we also have to answer a different question we never had before. Should we focus on capital expenditure subsidization or operational expenditure subsidization? The CapEx subsidies, traditional way we did, and we will do, Intel and Magdeburg and all the other, we are doing is European-wide. The European Chips Act is asking for European battery production is nothing else than to work on specific new production plans using the CapEx subsidies. But we also see, and this is the IRA secret, if you want to say, it's the operational expenditure subsidization. Over 10 years make clear that the running of the company may be related with different cost structures than it should be otherwise. And here there is really a point we have to answer. Next slide. And we have, I only want to make I want to cause a higher awareness on your side about this new quality of industrial policy, which is, and I see 2 other reasons, is the geopolitical reasons and the resilience of supply chain. So this is quite clear. So it's also addressed in the Critical Raw Materials Act. I think it's the Critical Raw Materials Act, for me, the most important act from the European side, just in all these net zero industry package, because here we can work, we can change a lot in our countries. But I may open here that there's mining at home opportunity, and not only there's a circular economy aspect, but mining at home, and so we can do more, and we can increase and improve the resilience of our sourcing systems. And then in our industrial policy, in our question, what is at the heart of competitiveness for the future, what kind of industries you want to have? In Germany, you say, oh, the old and the new one. That's not really an economic category, old and new. It's only about competitive company activity or non-competitive industries. And then you can ask, what is behind the competitiveness? We have learned cluster and networks, very important. The German economy is a cluster economy. The European Cluster Observatory made clear that we have a lot in automotive, in biotech, in chemical products, and in electrical products, a lot of clusters around Europe, and these clusters are, I would say, a wonderful starting point for create more growth, because it's totally different in the United States. In the United States, they have standalone companies and not in the same way a cluster structure of the economy. So from this coming, I would only make clear that this is a point. Last, not the last, two last slides. The next one, please. only to make clear that Germany is really the nice guy, we leave all the money which is available for us in Brussels. We don't use the 25 billion euros from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. You can say that is a good message. Germany is giving something more back to you, to the other member states, but it's only one interpretation. The other is that Germany is not able to use the money due to our bureaucratic structure in our federal system. It's a very simple story. It's not so easy to get the money from Brussels to our local authorities, to our state authorities, because all these difficult interaction, different regulations of budgetary control and budgetary procedures, it makes it really sometimes impossible to use the money coming or it's available for us in Brussels. So this is not a good message for the competitiveness of Europe, because the Recovery and Resilience Facility was based on the idea that from this, after the pandemic, we will start in regaining momentum for growth in a better shape, so better regulation, better supply side conditions, better infrastructure, but it's not used in Germany for this, as we should do. And the last slide, and that's my last point, thank you for your attention so far, is what could be done on the European level. We are, I think, discussing some of the time things which could have the headline of micromanagement. And you mentioned all these burden of bureaucracy, all these coming from Brussels, and the companies are discussing this. For example, the supply chain management law or whatever you get for information and reporting, all the reporting laws, the burden is really a dramatic one and we have to move it on. My answer for that is that European integration should need a new general idea, and this is the integration topic, investment union and defense union. And this should be at the core of all activities or future plans for bringing European Union ahead, make a step for the future. The investment union for our European networks, European grid. Imagine we will have a European energy common market. That will make it very easier for us to manage the situation we have. In Germany, we're discussing a specific subsidization for electricity price, because we are not able to change the supply in a very short period of time. But if we were able to use Europe, and we will invest in the grids and have a better exchange between the renewable energy production European-wide, and we can invest together in a system of storage, then this perspective of a European energy common market as a most important point of the investment union would be very, very smart and would be really an answer. And the second is we should use the money together more efficient in defense. We pay 50% for defense.
Dr. HÜTHER, I'm going to have to ask you to speed up toward the end. Yes, we'd love to hear the rest of it.
Last sentence, we pay 50% on defense as the United States. We have only 25% effectivity. So we're doing this together. This is a framing for a more competitive European Union and European economic area. And I would say if we're going on that, with a clear financing structure, using the idea of a European investment fund as a follow-up to the next generation EU, I would say there is no fear about the competitiveness, but it's not so easy to go this way. But there are ideas available that could be helpful. Thank you so far, and I'm